UK police are investigating the apparent assault of a Hong Kong pro-democracy protester who was pulled into Chinese consular grounds and beaten. The incident happened during a demonstration against Chinese President Xi Jinping on Sunday in the city of Manchester in northwest England. In a video posted online by the BBC, a man in a black cap and a ponytail can be seen being hauled by several men through a gate into Chinese consular grounds. The protester, known as Bob, is then kicked and punched by 5 men as he lies on the floor. Police at the scene eventually step in to free him. A Greater Manchester police spokesperson told Reuters police inquiries were ongoing into the circumstances. They added that their officers responded immediately to defuse the situation. Speaking after the incident to the BBC, Bob, who has recently emigrated from Hong Kong, said the protest was peaceful.
Several
people from the Chinese consulate came out and destroyed our belongings. When we tried to stop them, they dragged me in and then punched and kicked me. Later, the British police pulled me out again. It's unreasonable and should not be done, because we have the freedom to express things. This is the reason why we came out to protest. The so-called government of Hong Kong says we are thugs. What are people in your government in China doing now? Who are the thugs? We are a peaceful demonstration. Why beat us?
Britain's Foreign Office did not immediately respond to a request for comment. In a post on Twitter, Alicia Kearns, a Conservative Member of Parliament and head of the Foreign Affairs Committee, has called on the Chinese ambassador to be summoned. The Chinese consulate in Manchester offered no immediate reply to requests from Reuters for comment. But at a news conference in Beijing, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin told reporters he wasn't aware of the situation. He added the Chinese embassy and consulate in the UK always abide by the laws of their host country. A friend of the man involved, who was also at the scene, said Bob had been left with cuts and bruises to his face and went to hospital for treatment. Protesters with banners had been outside the consulate during the first day of the Communist Party Congress. It is widely expected that Xi will be granted a third 5-year leadership term during the twice-decade event.
Everybody move back! Within the grounds of the Chinese consulate in Manchester, a protester is being beaten by masked men who dragged him in. He's seen being kicked and punched for at least 40 seconds before a police officer steps in and pulls him to safety. Bob Man escaped Hong Kong because of violence like this. He never expected to be front and centre of it in the UK.
Unbelievable. Ridiculous. Yeah. And actually that moment, I was thinking that I might die inside, because that's not surprised that they would do that.
As well as the cuts to his face, Bob's left with bruises all over his body.
They like a gangster, you know? They just doing things like gangster. It shouldn't be like that. It's not in China, you know? This is UK.
Why? It started as a peaceful pro-democracy protest, which quickly turned when consulate staff ripped down cartoon posters of China's president they deemed offensive. But it was the apparent involvement of the Consul General himself, pulling Bob's hair and watching on as he was attacked, which is cause for concern. We approached the consulate for a comment, but they didn't respond. Protests outside embassies and consulates aren't uncommon, but rarely do we see them escalate to the kind of violence witnessed here. It is now up to the police to investigate and determine what action should be taken, if any, and for the government to decide whether they make any diplomatic response. The Prime Minister's office said these reports are concerning, but calls are now growing for the Foreign Secretary to summon China's ambassador in Britain for an explanation.
We have a rich history of accepting protest. So this sort of behavior is not acceptable. I think our Foreign Secretary needs to set a good example, draw that red line that this sort of behavior will never be accepted from anyone.